Hello everybody. Next we return to Salford, where we'll be hosted by Manchester United. Kick-off on Sunday evening is 7:30 p.m, so you won't be rushing back from church parade. Sky has the broadcast rights, with Eyes Up Mother Brown also providing their usual coverage. Well, so here we are again. It's only a few weeks since our last trip up there. Since then, they've played 5 times in the league, winning twice, 3-1 at home to Newcastle and 2-0 at Man City, and drawing 3 times, 1-1 at West Brom and 0-0 away at both Chelsea and Palace. All of this has left them in second place with 54 points from 28 played. That's a somewhat academic 14 points behind Man City, and more importantly, 6 points above us, although we do have a game in hand. The 2-0 win at Man City was something of an oddity. They managed to simultaneously look better and inferior to their opponents. City, on the back end of a 20-plus game winning streak, weren't quite at the races on the day, but they still had that air about them. The old adage about losing battles but winning wars leapt to mind. Our opponents this weekend were in action in midweek, conceding a late away goal equaliser to Milan. That match was interesting as it marked the first goal for Amad Diallo. You may recall that when Daisy, the socially distant, support-bubbling personal assistant with a beautiful smile, looked into the player's arrival from Atalanta, she discovered that the player's history was so fishy Billingsgate were complaining about the smell. You'll recall that Diallo arrived in Italy from the Ivory Coast in the company of his brother, or possibly a distant cousin, and a chap called Hamed Traore. Critically, Traore had resident status in Italy, which, under Italian immigration laws, would allow close family members Italian residence, the so-called family reunification law. Diallo arrived bearing the surname Traore, the suggestion being that Traore Sr. was his dad. Now, since Daisy first put pen to paper on the subject, there's been some movement in the case, which had been under investigation by the Parma public prosecutor, who were taking an interest in people trafficking. Diallo, who changed his name back from Traore on his 18th birthday, confessed to having used falsified documents to give a misleading representation of his family relationship with Traore, thus illegally gaining residence in the boot-shaped country. In the end, he copped a deal and picked up a €48,000, which is around £41,000, or so I'm told, fine from the Italian FA. Both Daisy and I have been unable to find out whether the admission will affect Diallo's status. Prior to January, the player would have qualified as an EU citizen by virtue of his Italian passport, which now seems likely to have been granted on the back of iffy documentation. There may be more trouble ahead for the player unless his presence here is purely based on his Ivorian background. On the fitness front, Marcus Rashford faces a late fitness test. Now there's an indication of changing times. When I was a lad at the Attila the Hun primary, school dinners were so disgusting that anyone forcing more kids to eat them would have been rounded up and put in a cage, with the public being allowed in to prod them with pointy sticks. Nowadays it seems to get you an MBE. There is of course a nice symmetry to the whole school dinners thing with Manchester United. As has been well documented, their success since the 1950s was based in part on the millions made by butcher and major shareholder Lewis Edwards, who notoriously bribed his way into getting the contract to supply Manchester Council with the meat for school dinners, that meat usually consisting of the stuff stamped not fit for human consumption. In addition to Rashford, they have quite a lengthy sick list. Pogba, Mata and Van der Beek are all out. Cavani and De Gea face late fitness tests, with Henderson likely to deputise for the latter. Martial is also unlikely to make an appearance. Well, enough of them. Let's move on to the wild and wacky world of association football. And as Liverpool and Spurs become more and more concerned about their potential failure to qualify for Europe, the latest revised plans to protect them have been under discussion. Liverpool in particular are of the opinion that they should be allowed into the so-called Champions League purely because they're Liverpool. On the other hand, most right-thinking people would think they should be kicked out of every competition going for precisely the same reason. It's all to do with coefficients, a complicated mathematical formula designed to make it almost impossible for Europe's biggest clubs not to qualify for Europe based on their history. I'd expand that concept so that any club found, say, guilty of match fixing and that would have been expelled from their national league but for a spot of dodgy dealing, would automatically be banned from Europe in perpetuity. How does that grab you, Liverpool? It's a serious point, though. If the plans were approved for next season, there's every chance that a team qualifying for Europe on merit could be replaced by a team finishing several places below them just because they're Tottenham. Hasn't Europe got its own dandruff problems without importing more? Elsewhere, referee Darren Drysdale picked up a ban following his tete-a-tete with Northampton's Alan Judge. Now, I've got mixed feelings about this one. I mean, the ban is right and should be a reminder to some, but by no means all, referees, that they're not bigger than the game. There are any number of officials whose actions add up to a meaningful definition of the phrase improper conduct, and it's a sanction that ought to be considered a lot more. On this occasion, though, I'd like to have seen some action taken against Judge, who provoked the whole thing. Mind you, I suspect that the men in the middle will get their own back. Judge is going to be a marked man going forward. You think they don't bear grudges? Look at how many cast-iron penalties were turned down by referees after Di Canio had had his little run-in with one of their number. Also, at the time of writing, it looks like Sheffield United boss Chris Wilder is on his way out. Shame. He was doing such a great job. Let's move on to us. The release of the latest set of accounts show that, like the rest of football, heavy losses have been made at the club. It has been commented that debt is okay as long as you have the wherewithal to service it, which of course is true. Whilst interest rates are at present at a record low, it's unlikely to be an issue for the foreseeable future. However, they'll need to keep an eye on things. Any significant raise could have worrying consequences, not just for us, but for the game in general. I'm sure a close eye is being kept on things. After all, if anyone knows about interest rates, it's our owners. On to last weekend, and another 3 points. Thank you very much. Pleasing to see that the standards within the club are such that the immediate post-match interviews with both players and management were to the effect that there was dissatisfaction with the performance amongst the general happiness at getting the win. Leeds did have chances, but such was their general demeanour, I'm not sure I felt worried at any stage after we got the first. Dawson continues to surprise and is close to making enough appearances to trigger a permanent deal for a fee of next to nothing. Pound for pound, he's arguably the league's signing of the season. In the middle, Mike Dean behaved himself for once. I suppose it's too much for him to have been handed the final warning that he should have been given about 20 years ago. He couldn't resist stopping play at one stage to intervene in a non-existent penalty area situation at a corner, thus ensuring a good minute of camera time as he walked very slowly into the box to tell two very bemused players to carry on not doing whatever it was they weren't doing in the first place. Dean did miss another penalty as a two-handed shove into Souček's back resulted in a nasty-looking collision with a goalpost. It was looking touch and go for a while, but our inquiries have ascertained that the goalpost is likely to have made a full recovery in time for Arsenal's visit next weekend. Although not at his most influential against Leeds, Lingard's administrative absence this weekend will be a big miss for us. If you can get past all the depressing amount of ink wasted in the newspapers on the subject of various members of the royal family and dodgy share-dealing, phone-hacking, now ex-TV presenters, there have been reports that Lingard is of a mind to make the deal permanent at the end of the season, as long as the clubs can come to some sort of arrangement. I'm hard-pushed to remember another loan signing making an instant impact. Dawson sat on the sidelines for ages before making his own so-called instant impact. I wasn't impressed with Lingard's signing at first, but it took the player about 5 minutes to change my mind. My only worry is that his parent club will realise how good the player really is and try and price us out of the market, which, given the state of our accounts, would probably be no difficult thing to do. On the injury front, Masuaku continues to improve and may be back in contention in early April or thereabouts, which would be a useful addition to the squad for the run-in. We've finally had an update on Ogbonna. He's had the protection removed from his ankle and has started to run on the anti-gravity treadmill, which sounds like a spectacularly sci-fi piece of kit. He's a long way off, though. Yarmolenko and Randolph are still out, whilst there's a small chance that Fredericks might be able to make the bench. If not, we may be looking at a two-keeper bench again. Prediction. Well, I'm not convinced that they're all that good, despite their win last week. I really think that there's something to be gained from this one, notwithstanding Lingard's absence. We have a bit of a swagger about us, and we're now in the position where teams think about us as much as we do about them. This is especially true now that the traditional refereeing issues have been negated to a large extent by the lack of a home crowd. I'm not getting carried away, mind, so I think I'll take the £2.50 extra that I'll pay for any newspaper that replaces any column inches allotted to Piers Bloody Morgan and replace it with a piece of white paper. And instead I'll place that £2.50 on a draw. I'll take the odds on a 1-1, please, if that's okay with you, Mr. Winston. Enjoy the game.